Welcome to the 9th episode of SteeleWatching, which is a podcast for Remington Steele fans. My name is Sara, and I am one of the hosts.
And I'm Eric. I am one of the other hosts. Okay, the other host.
The only other.
Yes, I'm an only.
And we are going to be talking about the episode In the Steele of the Night. This episode first aired on December 3rd, 1982, and was written by Joel Steiger, or Steiger, not sure, and directed by Bert Brinkerhoff. So I looked at both the production synopsis and the TV guide listing for this, and I kind of want to read them both because the TV guide listing is sort of terrible, but funny at the same time, and the production synopsis is a little bit more accurate. So the production synopsis simply reads, Laura and Remington attend a reunion of private investigators who are forced to investigate themselves when their hated host dies under mysterious circumstances. Sure. Okay. I mean, it kind of ignores Murphy, but whatever. So does Laura. The TV guide listing for the episode read, Whodunit? As the only outsider at a house party, Remington is asked to identify the killer in a group of Laura's former colleagues after one of them is found dead. This is a weird way to describe this. It's not a house party. I mean, I guess it's at a house, but like, it's not what I think of when I hear house party, personally.
Okay, so what do you think of when you hear the term house party? Because this is kind of in line with what I would think of. It's a party at a house as opposed to a party at a restaurant or convention center or whatever. So what do you think?
Yeah, I guess, but like this was meant to be like I guess a reunion weekend, and I would normally think if you say house party, I would think like something maybe a little bit more crazy, a little bit more like associated with younger people, like in their 20s or 30s. Like I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily think. I guess they are some in that age range. I don't know. I just felt
you're thinking Animal House,
not that kind of house party. I don't know. this was a weird, and the whodunit question mark was an odd choice. So I just thought it was fun to read both of those. Yeah.
Every time I hear the title of this episode or I read it, I can't help but think of a 1950s song.
Yes.
In the Steele of the Night.
I think that's maybe what it's sort of playing off of. But again, this is one that kind of like weirdly only sort of tangentially makes reference to the plot because like lots of things happen at night in many episodes. Mm-hmm. So I think they were really reaching here, trying to find like, okay, we'll call it In the Steele of the Night. And like, I think I would have gone for something more related to like a reunion, like Steele seeing each other again. I don't know, something that's terrible, but something along those lines. This is why I was not in charge of the titles. Well, that and I was only 6 months old, so two reasons. But I think this is also the only episode in which we don't have a actual criminal. I mean, there's no murder. Spoilers for the end. There's no murder at the end of this. So it's kind of weird in the sense that it might be the only episode where there's no actual foul play aside from what Alan does to them. And I think it's probably the only episode in which I don't feel sorry for the victim at all. In fact, I outright dislike him, and you're supposed to. I think this is another example of the show playing with format. What do you think? And our expectations.
I was just trying to think if there was another episode that didn't actually involve a murder.
Well, I think there's lots that don't involve murder, but like where there's no actual murder.
Yeah. I'm thinking the one that is near the end of this season with the guy who steals all the money from the Federal Reserve. I don't think there's a murder in that one.
No, like there's lots of episodes where there isn't a murder, but like I think this is the only one where they think it's a murder and it turns out to be something else.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I may be dumb, but I'm stupid. No, wait a second. No, you're right. And I think it's actually well constructed in that sense because it's misleading.
Oh, yeah.
but it's honest.
Yeah.
Can you be honestly misleading? Telling a lie with the truth. Yes. So it's misleading, but it's done so intelligently and honestly. And as far as playing with the format, I don't know that it's really that far out of line for the format.
Well, it's a traditional whodunit in the sort of vein of Agatha Christie, which the next episode is as well. But there's no who done it. Like, nobody done it. I guess the victim done it. But like,
well, sometimes that's the mystery.
Someone done it, I guess.
So, yeah, I can see your point. I think it works well.
It's great.
I think it fits within the format, but no, I understand what you're saying there.
It's a twist nobody sees coming, which I like.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, and that's very Agatha Christie-ish as well, because you get novels like Murder on the Orient Express where everyone done it, and this was sort of the opposite of Murder on the Orient Express. Sorry if I've spoiled Murder on the Orient Express for anybody, but everyone done it. So this is like the opposite of that, which I kind of liked. Now that I've said done it a million times. I was also a bit confused about like the very like bitty opening scene before the credits where we watch the gun being placed in the suitcase. This is part of
that is out of character for the show.
Yeah. And I mean, we're meant to assume it's, I guess later on we think it's Carl and then we think it's Donald or whoever, but it wouldn't have been any of them because none of them packed the gun. Right. So who was putting the gun in the suitcase?
Well, it was
I guess Alan, but
Alan, yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
I had a mind fart there. But yeah, it was Alan.
Okay.
It was Alan doing it. And because the idea was he was going to implicate every single one of them in some different way. And so he first did it by putting it in Donald's suitcase so that when Murphy saw it.
No, it was Carl.
Was it
Carl?
Was it Carl's first?
Donald is the dopey guy with the glasses. Carl was the first guy that had it in the suitcase.
All right.
It's hard to, I know. They like to use Donald and Carl as names a lot. I noticed this too.
So Murphy saw it in Carl's suitcase. And so naturally, when Alan's body was discovered, there would be some suspicion fall on him, even though he didn't die by being shot.
Which nobody thinks of. And
then, of course, it wound up in Donald's suitcase, which kind of then further implicated him, even though, again, Alan wasn't shot. But it implicated by intent or by appearance of intent. Yeah, it's kind of I did a deliberate mislead for later. Yes. And then it switches to Steele in his office where he's opened this letter it's left in his drawer. But then later Laura says she left it in her wastebasket, which is also confusing. He pulled it out of his drawer. Yeah, he pulled it out. So maybe he pulled it out. Where he got it. That's true. And so, it's an invitation to this Havenhurst reunion. He has to know that even though the invitation included him, Laura didn't invite him, right? Given that the office is empty, she's gone. That's a question. How did he, this was my question, wouldn't he have wondered where everyone was? Wouldn't he have known when they left? Yeah, did they sneak out? That's because that's the only two options is that when he was inside, they snuck out. Yeah. And you would have thought that he would have had some clue, heard him leaving, or, it's 5:00. They must have left already. Either that or he came in and they were gone and he just forgot that they were gone when he got there. Yeah. How did they get out without him knowing? It's a bit of a weird, because Murphy, Bernice, they would have all had to skedaddle and he would have been and what was he doing sitting there in the office all by himself? If he's not meeting with a client and doing his whole, frontman thing, why is he there? Why would he's got no pencils. He's got nothing in his drawer to play, Scrabble. I don't what, why would he just be sitting there all by himself? He doesn't have a phone to play with. Come on. He's got no apps. He doesn't have any games to be, Yeah. So it's a bit of a weird. It's obviously meant to introduce that they're already gone and he's not been invited and he's not there and he's smiling about it, so he's planning to go. And I think it's that we've seen this in the episode before this and the episode before it, that he's eager to be part of a team. And
he likely doesn't like the idea of being deliberately excluded. I don't think anybody would. He doesn't have a family. He doesn't really have any, as we know, any close friends that he spends time with outside of this job that he's doing right now. And he only has them. And we've seen this before. He doesn't like being kept out of the loop. He genuinely doesn't like being out of the loop when it comes to Laura. The fact that Murphy's gone has to sting. And especially since they haven't really been expressly romantic since they kissed with plausible deniability. So do we think that he went just because he was feeling left out, or do we think we went kind of to tease or drive Laura crazy, or was it a bit of both?
I'll say a bit of both. Plus, hey, one more thing, as Steve Jobs used to say, or as the late night TV guys used to say, but that's not all. I think it was a little bit of his, I don't want to say ego, but his delusion that he's Remington Steele, and Remington Steele was invited. So why wasn't Remington Steele told about this invite?
Yeah, well, he couldn't resist to do that. Remington Steele's 10 Famous Cases book. So, I guess this kind of tracks in that he felt that Remington Steele's presence was necessary in some way.
Yes. Yes.
It really, really wasn't.
But I think you're also correct, certainly, in that he wanted to surprise Laura, put that in sarcasm quotes, but also that he was just, what am I going to do? It's the weekend. Got nothing going on. I could be doing this, but they didn't want me to come. Thanks, guys.
I've got an invitation, though.
Yeah.
His name's on the invite, so.
That's right.
He's allowed to go.
Yeah, I think it was probably just bored, lonely, nothing better to do.
Yeah, that's fair. And then, of course, we switch over to Laura and Murphy in the car on their way. And despite the fact that we've seen them in the past couple episodes developing this friendship, Laura is pretty adamant he not come. And obviously there's an element here of fear. She doesn't want her former colleagues to discover her ruse. We learn it's been 4 years since they both left Havenhurst, which is a bit confusing because it means there couldn't have been a lot of time between Laura's agency failing, Remington Steele investigations opening, and developing the sort of reputation that they claimed to have had by the time he came along. But, I mean, it's a little confusing.
Well, is the reputation, was it actually developed or was it PR'd?
It had to have been developed enough that the guy in the motel room in the second episode recognized Steele as Remington Steele. Like, the name must have been known enough that once they started plastering his picture everywhere, people were putting two and two together.
Yeah, although I think that guy was reacting more to the image of Remington Steele physically, that he'd seen his face somewhere, than the reputation. I'm gonna guess that much of the agency's reputation was dummied up by PR. Because again, remember, he supposedly had this background in secret intelligence and the CIA,
the company.
Yes. So all of that was all bogus.
Denying
but it
the
was
rainy
out
season.
there. Yeah, but it was all bogus, but it was out there. And keeping in mind that the internet really didn't exist back then as a publicly accessible facility. It was still, it actually, the internet's been around for decades.
Oh yeah, it's been since the 60s,
the 1950s or so, or 60s. But it was a military only implementation, and it wasn't opened until the 1990s or 1980s to the public. So you didn't have the ability to go and do background checks and find out information, all this information on people individually. It would actually take going through newspaper archives, also called morgues, curiously enough. So you'd have to do a lot of manual work to do research on somebody. So you could get away with a lot of stuff just by saying it happened.
And it's funny because I often think about what would they do now. I know that there's a lot of people that don't want to see a reboot, and I'm one of them in that, this was a product
especially
of its time.
As a 30-minute comedy.
Oh, God, no.
Situation comedy, no.
No. But at the same time, I do sometimes think, well, how would they manage to get around the fact that he's got no internet presence? and or, not even a stock photo. And then when he does come along, how would they, I think it might be interesting there, but I don't think that they could. It's lightning in a bottle and you couldn't capture it twice. So it's best left alone.
It would be a lot more complicated to pull that off.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I think that part would be interesting, because you're right. As you said, back then, there wasn't a lot of ways to do a background check. In fact, in that premiere episode, that's how he manages to masquerade as Ben Pearson for so long, because the wire photo takes a couple days. So, it would be... Anyway, either way. and the issue of time zones would have been more accentuated. True.
Because now you just, we're going to send an email off to somebody. I can do it whenever it's convenient. And then they pick it up at work the next business day. Whereas to do it back then, let's see, I have to calculate the time difference. And let's see, so I have to be up at 1:30 in the morning. Call them, and somebody doesn't show up, and so they don't answer their phone on their desk or whatever. But so it would have been a lot more complicated back then. Absolutely.
Yeah. It makes it work anyway. I think it would be harder for it to work now, for sure. Mm-hmm. And Murphy seems pretty content to reminisce and not talk about Steele, and he's pretty happy that Laura is there and Steele is not there. So they get up to the mansion. Are we really meant to believe that you can make this kind of money as a private investigator? Because I am in the wrong line of work, if that is the case.
Well, obviously you can, because, look at it.
I'm sorry, but that is a palatial estate. And he's I get that he stole the client list from Havenhurst, and he did some shady stuff, but I don't know. I just don't buy the mansion that he has. It's a little much.
It's a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
Which makes you think that maybe the detective business wasn't his only source of income.
Yeah, that's what I kind of thought.
And we find out some more things about him later in the episode that kind of suggest that, maybe he was applying a little pressure here and there in exchange for certain financial considerations.
Definitely feels that way, for sure. He's not an honest guy.
Which is such an ugly term.
Which is odd, because Laura and Alan seem awfully flirty with one another, almost to the point of comfortable intimacy. He assumes that Steele couldn't come because his wife put her foot down, and Laura says there is no Mrs. Steele. He gives her a once over and says not yet, which is weird, because
got it written down there.
Why would he assume there's something between Laura and her boss when he's never met the man?
Well, and of course we find out later in the episode that, there was all this intrigue going on. Murphy had eyes for Laura.
Yeah.
The other gal had eyes for Alan.
Sandy, yeah.
But, Sandy, thank you. But we also know that Laura had previously set her sights on her college calculus professor.
Yeah.
And so given that, combined with this, you mean there's no Mr. Steele yet, kind of makes you think that maybe she had her eyes set on Alan Greeby as well, and Alan was aware of it.
You have to wonder, though, when that would have been, because Wilson was somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah.
Bankers do it with interest, belts. Mm-hmm. And they don't actually say how long the relationship lasted, or at least we don't know that yet. Mm-hmm. But it had to have lasted.
Of course, Wilson could have been in that 4-year period between leaving Havenhurst and Steele walking into the front door.
That's true. Yeah, we don't know. And I would actually buy that she maybe had a thing with Alan at some point, because, again, they seem awfully comfortable physically with each other. And then he goes on to say he lost 30 pounds, and Laura says she would kill to lose 5. I gotta assume this
lady, you need to put on some weight. You don't need to be getting smaller.
I have to assume this was a case of the writers assuming that every woman wants to lose weight and just sort of inserting it in there without thinking, because she, as you just said, she's a thin woman, and for her to lose any more weight, she'd look unhealthy. And also, she's never shown any insecurity about her appearance up until this point.
Could that just be social convention?
I think it was. Yeah.
On her part.
Yeah,
yes.
I think it was just sort of meant to be the expected answer that she would give. Because Alan then looks at her and says, where? And then she grins and says, places you haven't seen, which implies they haven't been involved. But maybe they've always had this like, will they, won't they flirty thing going on, and it never happened. So
Yeah, which goes back into
Yeah.
our previous discussion.
yeah, there must have been something going on there. Because Murphy comes in, he sees the somewhat intimate positioning between Laura and Alan, and then he's got a snide comment of, I see the reunion has already begun. So another sort of implication that they've been closer than Murphy would like anyway. And that's continuing now. Because then we get the other people that come in. Carl, who is very eager to have everyone know he drives a Seville, which is pretty funny since Donald points out somewhat in awe that Alan has an elevator. I think the elevator trumps the Seville, but, who knows? I wonder, do you think that Laura's right that reunions are for old friends to see one another? Or do you think they're for showing off how well you're doing for yourself? Because that seems to be what a couple like Carl wants to do, even though it turns out to be a lie. And Alan definitely wants to do, even though he's also kind of hiding the fact that he's ill. So what do you think?
Theoretically or practically speaking?
Maybe both.
I think theoretically speaking, it is. It's to see old friends and get caught up on what's been happening. I think practically speaking, in the real world, it's more the other. It's about, oh, look what I've done.
It's usually about, look what I have. Look how I look. Look who I married.
Or, I guess there could be a variation of that, which is, what if I had married that person? What do they look like? What is their life now? What would have been my life with them if something like that had happened? So a little bit of that maybe, but yeah, it's mostly just self-serving.
Look at me, look at me, look at me. That's fair.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I attended one of my high school class reunions, I think, for a very, very short period of time. And it was not enjoyable.
So ours is a bit different.
Of course, it's Canadian.
Well, here instead of doing like a 10-year reunion for a specific class, you'll get the anniversary of the school, and then they'll do a reunion for anyone who ever attended. So like the sweater that I'm wearing right now, you can't see it, but it says Arthur Whodunit 90th reunion. And I was part of the organizing team for that. And in a couple of years, we will have our 100th. So everybody will be invited to come back and that. So it's not really like, oh, it's only this group of people. It could be anybody that's ever attended the school. And they do them every 10 years roughly. But yeah, I think you're right about why we do it.
And that makes sense. Actually makes more sense than a class reunion.
Yeah.
If you view a reunion as a reason to reconnect with people, because I don't know of anybody who can say that, well, when I went to high school or when I went to college, the only people I knew were those who were in my same class.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when you go back, there's always going to be people missing because they were the year ahead of you. They were the year behind you, maybe 2 years either direction. And you knew them. You interacted with them. You had
dated them in some cases.
Yeah. Okay. What secrets are we hiding from everybody now? No, but you know what I'm saying is that those people were part of your life during school as well. They weren't necessarily part of your class, but they were part of your life. And so when you go back to a reunion, those are some people that you might want to see. But in a regular, traditional, I'll say American class reunion, that doesn't happen. Sounds like Canada does things a little bit differently. So
I can't speak for the whole country, but for this area, this school board where I am, that's kind of how we do it. So
okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah,
sounds good.
So, and then we switch. Murphy's getting changed for dinner. Goes into Carl's room to ask him if he has a tie, and you see this is where we see the gun in Carl's bag. This is obviously meant, again, this is part of this mislead to have Murphy find the gun, then to have that misdirect. But I wonder, would it have been? This is your fault. It's transferred over.
That's right.
Would it have been that unusual for a private investigator to carry a firearm? I know we know that Steele and Company have theirs all over the darn place, but I guess he's not on the job, but I have to, and this is where my assumptions about America could be wrong, but is it all that unusual? Because in Canada, it would be very odd to see a handgun because handguns are very rarely ever carried at all unless you have specific permits. But like hunting rifles and stuff are pretty common here, but handguns aren't. So I wonder if Murphy, he seems oddly shocked.
Well, I've never been a detective, but I suppose I could say I played one on TV. I mean, after all, who could fact check me, right?
True.
I would say that there's a misconception based largely on what Hollywood has fed us, that every
Fair.
detective in the country carries a gun. Probably not true. Probably,
Okay.
I would say probably less than half carry a gun, because let's face it, a lot of detective work is just drudgery. It's doing paperwork.
Cheating
it's doing
spouses.
Well, it's not even just in that sense. I'm just talking about in the sense that it's all, or a lot of it is paperwork. It's research. It's tracking down information. They're not the kinds of situations where you would typically need a gun.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some detectives that do carry guns. I don't think they're going to leave them in their suitcase.
Yeah,
that's the
stupid
thing
spot.
that would, I think, surprised Murphy as much as anything, is not that he had a gun with him, but that he didn't have
that's
it
fair.
on him.
Yeah.
What good is a gun if it's over there and I need it now? Oh, please, Mr. Badman, stop shooting at me so I can go get my gun and I can shoot at you. No, ain't happening.
Just got to go to my suitcase for a minute. Just hold on. Hold that thought.
Really? No, not happening. So I don't think it was the fact that he had a gun. It was the fact that it was in the suitcase. Although he did say, 38, that's pretty serious baggage for a weekend in the country.
Yeah.
So,
and then what I found equally weird is that when Carl says, I wouldn't know, I never carried it, Murphy doesn't show it to him or press the issue or like say, well, it's right here. Like it's here. It's in your bag right here. Come and have a look.
Yeah.
He just kind of ignores it. So, I mean, I guess that was for the service of the plot, but it just felt odd that you would mention it and then not point it out that it's there. And then again, we switch over to, it's just before dinner. Murphy is walking with Sandy. She's the other woman that was invited to the reunion. It's funny, they're all dressed for dinner. She's still in her bathing suit, but she describes how she ended up marrying her husband, who she was introduced to when she was at Havenhurst, which according to Carl was a zoo with 70 detectives. That's a lot.
Yes.
And she said that Murphy introduced her to her husband. He came to see if, I think his wife was cheating on him, or was it the other way around? The wife came.
Oh, so you pulled a divorce case. A Mrs. Robin Maxwell convinced her husband was doing the dirty deed outside of marriage.
And he was.
He was guilty, and you did catch him.
Why would you marry a guy that you meet investigating for adultery? That just, I don't know. That seems like a red flag from the start, but okay.
Well, it is. It is. You're right. It is a red flag, but I think the whole situation kind of explains itself if you think about the fact that here she is, she's a detective. She's got certain ethical standards she's supposed to be operating by. She violated them at the very beginning of the relationship by telling the wife that, no, he's not cheating.
He's good. You're fine.
And she has no problem admitting it. Yeah, I lied to her while I'm hopping in the sack with her husband. So, boy, those people at Havenhurst. Yeah, it was not only a zoo, but it was a zoo full of people who just couldn't trust them.
Keep their hands off each other. Yeah, that's fair.
Well, and you couldn't trust them, ethically speaking.
No, and she couldn't have, it couldn't have taken her long because it's been 4 years since Murphy left and he got the case after being at the agency for a year. She said that. So she obviously married this guy and had his kids pretty darn fast. So that I found kind of interesting. Like, I don't know if they were too focused on their timeline there, but yeah. But you're right. They're kind of all very unethical in the sense that Carl helped Alan steal a client list. Donald was working for Alan in his shady practice. Technically, Laura invented a boss. Like, that's dishonest. They've all sort of crossed some lines.
Well, and then also Donald may not have been unethical, as obviously everybody else in the agency was, but he was definitely, he had issues. I mean, we find out later that Alan would just walk all over him.
Yeah.
And Donald said, "Oh, isn't this wonderful? He likes
seemed to
me."
like it. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like the abused spouse syndrome in a way.
Yeah. Oh, I sort of wondered at one point, is Donald in love with Alan? Because he definitely gave off this vibe of like Alan could do no wrong, and Alan did a lot of wrong.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I mean I hadn't thought about that, but
now you're doing it.
yes,
Sorry.
I hadn't thought about that, but I suppose it's true. I mean, back in the 80s, they might not have wanted to bring that out explicitly,
Yeah.
exactly, but. Yeah, you're right. If you look at it from that sense, it is an unrequited romance.
It's an unrequited something, definitely.
Yes.
Whether
Yes.
it's, yeah.
Or maybe he
and
just
then, of course,
he just needed a friend, and Alan was the closest. You know,
sad.
some people think an abuser. Well, at least they're giving me attention.
Yeah, yeah, which is sad.
Yes.
Laura sees Murphy and Sandy talking. Carl appears behind her and asks what she thinks they're talking about. Laura says she doesn't want to play detective. You get the impression that she doesn't really like Carl, just given the way she turns away from him. She doesn't really react to him the way she did to Alan, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl points out that reunions are supposed to be for missed opportunities. So they all sort of have their opinion as to what reunions are supposed to be for. And that Sandy and Murphy are likely asking why they didn't notice each other back at Havenhurst. And he astutely points out to Laura that Murphy was looking at Laura, Sandy was looking at Alan, and Laura's not listening.
No.
Which Carl then turns around and accuses her of never talking to him, despite thinking that they are a lot alike. And it's obvious that Carl has a chip on his shoulder. He's massively insecure about Alan and everyone who surrounded Alan. It's kind of odd, though, I think, for Laura to be so oblivious both to Carl's attempts to befriend her and Murphy's attraction to her. I wonder if that's a deliberate obliviousness or if she just wasn't listening to him.
She obviously wasn't listening. But the motivation, I had that written down in my notes too as well. Because as Carl is talking to her, she's looking over at Murphy and Sandy.
Yep.
And this is at the same time that Carl is saying he never looked at her because he was always looking at you. And I'm wondering if that caught her a little bit by surprise.
Yeah, maybe.
And so that just kind of shut her down as far as any potential conversation with Carl, because it was like, what?
Yeah, that's a good point. It could be that she maybe just sort of checked out because she didn't want to go down that road or just thought it was weird or whatever.
Or somebody pointed out a road to her that she didn't even know existed.
Yeah, it could just be her going, huh? No. Okay. What?
Murphy?
Really?
No.
Murphy? No. He's not in. He's
not into me.
And then I think it becomes more obvious as the episodes go along. But
yes.
Then we switch to after dinner drinks.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing this game of best murder, which is really morbid.
Especially
since they all seem so excited about it.
It's one of the hazards of the profession, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, after all, people who work in mortuaries or morgues, I mean, they probably do some really weird stuff too to somebody on the outside, like sit down and eat their lunch while they're working on a dead person.
Yes. Cadaver right next to them.
Yeah. And having worked with people in law enforcement in the past, I know that they have some really bizarre conversations over dinner, or whatever. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that this would be considered entertainment for a bunch of detectives.
It's very dark entertainment, but yeah, that's true. That's a good point. And then, of course, Alan describes, though we don't know this yet, the manner in which he's about to die. So he says there's an express elevator, man gets on, goes down to the 3rd floor, and when the door opens, he's dead. There's no stops in between, and the others have to try to figure out the murder. Carl, Sandy, Donald, they all repeat what Alan has told them. Murphy asks if he was poisoned, which is a smart question, but Laura is the one who says, and it was murder, to which Alan doesn't answer directly, which gives away the episode's mystery, though we don't know it yet, which I thought was really clever. And before he gets any further, of course, there's a knock on the door. Laura goes to answer it, and it's Steele. He shows her the invitation, says he got it from her wastebasket. And
Panic!
Poor Laura. She's, and I just think as well, if she really didn't want him to come, why leave it in the office at all? Why not rip it up, shred it, take it home? Was it subconscious that she left it there? Like, it just seems you're tempting fate if you toss it in your garbage or wherever.
Carelessness?
Yeah.
I mean, she's smart, but sometimes she does some incredibly boneheaded things.
Yeah, true.
And I think this could just be one of those.
Yeah, that's true.
It was in my garbage can. What are you doing going through my garbage can?
That's fair. What was he doing going through her garbage can? That's an odd thing to do.
We don't know.
Was he looking for pencils? Maybe he thought they were there. I don't know. So she brings him in. She takes his arm, which is interesting because it's a similar physical intimacy that she had with Alan, she now has with him. And the moment he comes in, she's uncomfortable with Alan touching her. Alan puts his hand on her shoulder. She flinches. I wonder if that's because Steele is now there and she doesn't want him to see another man touching her, or if it's just simply because Steele is there and she didn't want him there.
I don't know. We've already kind of concluded that there must have been something between the two of them at some point, at some level, not necessarily a completely intimate relationship, but some relationship between them. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. It could be either. It could be anything.
I think it might be a bit of both. For my part, I think it's a bit of both. She doesn't want him there. She's terrified that he's going to open his mouth and say something stupid, and he does. And,
of course. In the biggest way possible.
Oh, it's brilliant, too. I think it's one of those things where it's either too dumb to be believed or dumb enough to be believable. And they choose the latter instead of the former, to Loris's relief. But it's so funny. When he starts telling the best murder story, the bullet started inside his chest. And Laura says, I think I've had too much to drink. Murphy responds with, I don't think I've had enough to drink. And both of them are mortified. He somehow manages to sell it. And then when he's asked to explain it, he does the same thing Alan did. He tells him, take the weekend, savor it, let it invade your senses and your dreams and all that stuff he says.
Yeah.
And thankfully then, after that, it's bedtime. Laura takes him aside. She demands to know what movie he saw the murder in, which is my favorite part. And he says, I'm shocked you'd think I would use a murder from a movie. And
somebody might have seen it.
Yeah, someone might have seen it. And then this only horrifies her even more because she realizes he made it up and he doesn't know the answer. At least if he made it up from a movie, he'd have some sort of answer, but now he doesn't. And that's when they hear Carl and Alan arguing. Carl is angry at Alan for something. Alan makes the case that Carl wanted to be used, that men like him ask for it, which, oof. And then Carl looks like he's ready to get violent. He stalks away. And then we switch over to Laura waking up in the morning. There's a noise. She follows it out. She finds the body in the elevator. And it's, the door shutting on the elevator.
Hopping back a second, you pointed out that during their argument, Alan tells Carl that people like you are just meant to be used. They just want to be used.
Yeah.
And yet that's exactly also the same thing he did to Donald. Are we seeing
he's right,
that it's not just Donald that he was doing that to? Maybe he was doing it to everybody he knew.
Well, and he did it to Sandy, too, to an extent.
Yeah,
I mean,
in a different way. Yeah.
Definitely a different way.
Yeah. So Alan is definitely not a nice person.
No, he very much isn't. I don't think anybody feels bad that he ends up dead, but
no. In fact, there are probably a few people cheering. Anyway, we were at Laura hearing the door in the
elevator. So she comes out. She sees him. Murphy comes out. The rest of them all come out. Murphy goes to move the body. Carl points out it's tampering with physical evidence. He's right.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't Murphy know better? I would think he would know not to touch anything if it's a crime scene. It's an odd thing for him to do.
I guess it's the kind of thing that would be the natural thing for somebody to do. I mean, here's
True.
the guy sitting in the middle of an elevator door. The door's bang, 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 hitting him.
Yeah.
It would just be a natural human reaction to want to get him out of that elevator door and get things kind of under control, stop the noise, the issue, just kind of get control of the scene and get it organized. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is tampering with evidence, but it only gets worse from there.
Oh my God, yes. Laura says they should call the police.
That's what you typically are expected to do.
This is what you would do. And then Donald says no because it might hurt their business. Murphy, for some bizarre reason, agrees to that. Laura was in prison in Thou Shalt Not Steal. So this feels really silly for Murphy to be like, oh yeah, this could look bad. They literally had an episode where their agency was suspected of stealing a famous painting. So it feels very weird that they give in to that excuse, not only for that, but then Laura proceeds to put her foot in her mouth by saying it would only work if there was someone to investigate them with no axe to grind. And just that, where she's talking and Murphy puts his hand on her shoulder, she realizes what she's done, she groans.
Does the phrase paint yourself into a corner come to mind with anybody?
It does. And also, they all agree to this, but I have to think that there would still be some bias there, even pretending for a second that Steele is just their boss, their actual boss. I would have to think that there would still be a bias there, given that Laura and Murphy are presumably his employees. So it feels a bit strange that the others agree to this on those grounds alone. He didn't know Alan, but he knows his employees. He'd want to protect them and his business.
Yeah. So it does seem a little odd. Actually, the whole notion of them investigating themselves is just ridiculous.
It's so silly. It's just so silly. And then Steele.
But I mean, if you're going to buy into part of it, buy into all of it.
Yeah, I guess. And then with like a really great physical comedy moment, Steele comes out of his room. He's walking towards the elevator, talking about the fresh air and all the country, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, he says he sees the body. Laura's like, we need to have a word. And she's worried that he's obviously going to give the game away. So he promises to do his best to convince them. She's not convinced.
Well,
it's
back at the elevator in the physical comedy, when he's coming up to it, and you're right, he's doing all this wonderful, absurd action. And then he looks down and he sees the body. I love his line. I think I'll take the stairs.
The whole bit is good. It's totally a really good bit.
Yeah.
And it really showcases Brosnan's range at comedic acting, because he's when he's good, he's really good. And this is definitely one of those moments. When they're in the other room and they're talking, he's got an odd outfit on. Normally he's in a suit. He's in this weird turtleneck with like a suit jacket over top, which very strange choice. But anyway, that's just a random thought there.
For a while there, and I don't know the timeline. I would have to go back and research it. I'm really lousy at internet searches, but there was a period of time around then when that was the look.
It's a weird look.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, it was a thing.
Well, I like Laura's green sweater. It looks nice on her, but his outfit is strange. Anyway, he asks her where to start. And this is worth mentioning because it continues from the previous episode's theme of him leaning on her and asking her to teach him, and him not being naive enough to think that he can do this on his own, even though he does that whole, they need someone to guide them, teach them, whatever it is that he says later. He's definitely needing her help. And this is pretty clear. And so my question on the next scene, they go down to eat breakfast, or at least he does. He's mowing down on food. Where did they get the food? Who cooked the breakfast? They mention later on that there's no food in the house, that there's just dog food.
And why is he the only one with food in front of him?
Yeah. And who ate dinner? Like, obviously Alan must have made dinner last night.
Household help? They had prepared some meals in advance or something? Who knows? I don't know.
Maybe, because there's no staff there anymore, obviously, for the reason that Alan wouldn't want the staff there when his body is found. So it just feels like, where did they find the food? Because they make a big show of going into the kitchen later, not being able to find coffee or tea or anything. So
yeah, and it's a big breakfast. I mean, he's, like you said, he's chowing down on it, but it's a big breakfast, and he's the only one eating. He's the only one with any food at all. Yeah, it's definitely strange.
I think, this was meant to be a comedic scene, which it is. It's funny, but it also makes you scratch your head when you think later on, wait a minute, there's no staff here to cook the food and there's no food here. So, yeah, it's... But then Steele repeats Laura's advice to him earlier and asks who the last person was to see him alive, which immediately puts Carl on edge because they all heard the argument. And so then Carl reveals that Alan had him steal the client list from Havenhurst and then refused to hire him, which is a jerk move. Donald turned him in, and now he can't get hired. Murphy mentions the gun, which Carl denies, and it's interesting that at this point nobody goes, well, he wasn't shot, so why is that relevant? Because he wasn't shot. So, and it's a room full of detectives. Just thought that was strange.
Carl stole client information. Sandy lied to a client and protected a cheating husband. Alan is an admitted liar because remember earlier he said, remember, Laura, this is Alan you're talking to. I'm the one who taught you to lie like that. So, I mean, what a bunch of sleaze bags.
Wow.
But Carl certainly looks like a strong suspect at this point.
Yeah, and then they all rush up to check for his gun. But again, the gun wasn't fired. He wasn't shot. So they're tearing apart the room for what? For evidence that he had a weapon, I guess, that could potentially imply that he meant to hurt somebody. It just... It feels very strange. Steele makes a comment about how they need him to... This is where he's like, they need someone to lead them, guide them, show them how it's done. And Laura is profoundly irritated, especially when he pulls her out of the room and says, okay, what next? Like, what do I do? And she...
that whole thing about them running up and searching Carl's room, for some reason, and that's the first one of several scenes like that where everybody's running up, to here or there, the other thing. Even though it's really not the same exactly, it reminds me very much of the movie Clue at the end when Wadsworth is explaining the murder of Mr. Body. Well, it could have been like this. Run over here and then run over here and then you run over there and all that crazy insanity in that movie. That's what this reminds me of. And I kind of wonder if the folks who did the movie Clue got some inspiration from this, or maybe. Well, of course, Steele got it probably from somewhere else, but because the movie Clue came after this episode. So it's very reminiscent to me of that. Or
it's funny. Again, this is one of those things that's funny.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's a bit like Clue is a really good reference and comparison. And of course, Laura's response was immediately, I thought you were going to lead them, guide them, show them how it's done. And his response was, and I am, as soon as you tell me how to do it. To which she's in this weird place. She doesn't want to help him. But she knows that if she doesn't have much of a choice if she wants to save face.
She created the situation.
Yeah, this is her fault.
Yes.
She should not have left that invitation in the waste paper basket.
Well, I'm talking about more generally about having created a fake boss to run the agency. And
So she then tells them that they need to check the scene of the crime. And the face that she keeps making every time he walks away is hilarious too. Like, we talk about Pierce being good at physical comedy. Stephanie Zimbalist, she has sometimes the funniest, especially when she's frustrated with him. It's just the funniest facial expressions. And then he goes back, suggests the scene of the crime, and of course, like you said, they all race there as well. Alan's body's gone when they get to the elevator. I thought no one was supposed to move it. Where'd it go?
Well, I guess they moved it.
But they've all been together. None of them have. They went right down to breakfast, to which they went right back up to the bedroom and then right to the elevator. So is it like Harry and Vintage Steele? Did they get up and walk away?
Well, maybe Steele was moving the body while everybody else was down eating breakfast. And so by the time he got done and he came down, they'd finished eating their breakfast. The table had been cleared and his was the only food left. Maybe that explains the earlier scene.
And also, where did they put it? Is question number 2. Because
he's not in Ellen's room when they go to search it later.
He isn't. And granted, there's a lot of rooms. This is a big... Why does he have this many rooms for one dude? Who knows? But where'd the body go? Yeah, and then Murphy starts dusting for prints, which also begs the question, why would he bring a print dusting kit to a reunion? He's the only one that does, because he says it's his print kit, and none of them have one. So,
yeah, it's at about this point. I don't remember exactly when it is. I have it in my notes, but I don't have all the details of the timeline. It's when Sandy's confessing to Murphy and Donald is expressing his suspicions of Steele's.
It just kind of splits off.
Steele mangles Murphy's name. Did you catch it?
He does. He gets McMichaels. Yeah.
Yes.
I actually had that in my notes is this a Miss Wolf thing or a genuine screw up from Pierce?
That's a good question. There's another one that comes up in the next episode, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. Yeah. but yeah, like I wondered that too.
Now would be an excellent time to lead them, guide them, show them how it's done.
And you're right. This is the same scene. Donald suggests that he and Laura go get some coffee. They leave. Sandy shuts the elevator door to talk to Murphy. Why would Laura go off into the kitchen with Donald when he could potentially be the murderer?
Well, I guess if Donald murders her, then it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that she'll know. And I guess in some sense, there's some safety in that situation, because if Donald was the murderer and Laura winds up dead, it's a pretty fair conclusion who did it. And so then that would also link back to Alan.
True. Yeah.
But, this whole thing also in the midst of this conversation, back when she says, now would be an excellent time to lead them.
Yeah.
Considering how deep she and the agency are into this, she is enjoying the perverseness of Steele being flummoxed just a bit too much. I mean, it's almost like a cut off your nose to spite your face type thing, because if he doesn't succeed in this, it's going to reflect badly on the entire agency, which is actually her agency, which means it's going to reflect badly on her. It's going to affect her business. She's enjoying this a little too much.
She is. She really is. And she goes off with Donald. Steele goes off with Carl. Carl says he knows how to crack the case. He makes it and make it stick. And then that's where he hands Steele the little baggie with the threads. He's also trying to get a job from Steele, which is kind of funny. And he tells him he found the threads on Alan's body. He suggests that whoever killed Alan did so with something from those threads. Donald is really suspicious of the idea of having them all go and look for it. Sandy too. They start yelling. Laura
Everybody's accusing everybody else.
Shocker.
Yeah.
And this is where you said Laura snidely suggesting to him that this would be a good time to lead them, guide them, show them how it's done. And she's the one that suggests they take a break and they go off, and anyone who wants to look for it can. Anyone who wants to do something else can do that too. And they, for some reason, agree to that when they didn't all want to go look for the belt before, which is weird. Because Carl's main objection to it was that somebody could plant it, or one of their objections was that somebody could plant. They could still do that if they're all splitting up. So, it's kind of an odd. Yeah. That they agree when she points it out, but not when they point it out. I don't know. And then, they go into the other. Steele thinks it's going well. Laura disagrees.
Of course.
They hear a scream just after Steele says, only for a few more hours until nightfall if they can stay alive. They run up the stairs. He makes a comment about doing an awful lot of stairs, which is funny. And Sandy is crying in Murphy's arms. The threads match her housecoat. The belt is missing. Murphy thinks she's innocent. I gotta wonder if this is Murphy thinking with a different part of his body, potentially.
Yeah, I suppose so.
He seems awfully protective of Sandy, despite knowing what Sandy has done. Yeah. How she got married, how she,
It could be that even though he had eyes for Laura back at Havenhurst, that he did work with Sandy and she was a friend, maybe his investigative partner. And so they built up this work companion relationship that he's remembering that and saying, she was okay. Yeah, she lied to the client on this one. She married the guy that she was cheating. Okay, but as far as an investigator goes, she was a good investigator. She was an honest investigator. No, what? But it could just be that he's drawing back on that prior work relationship and saying, I don't think she did it.
That's fair. Because he does say, for what it's worth, I think she's innocent.
Mm-hmm.
And then Steele astutely points out that they have no proof that the fibers actually came from Alan's neck. To which Donald then accuses Carl of setting Sandy up. They fight again.
Carl seems to love to start fights.
He really does. He's in it against everybody, and Carl is the one that noticed that Sandy had been staying there. Ironically, Carl is probably actually fairly good at being a detective. He's the one who has noticed some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I'm not sure the others are as as astute as he is, because he's noticed that Sandy has been staying there. She admits that she and Alan were having an affair. And that she'd always been in love with him.
Yeah. Some women knit, some women do needlepoint. I did Alan Greevy.
It's like, okay, again, that's kind of a risque statement in the sense that, I did Alan Greevy, but, and then she talks about how Alan didn't want to be married, so she married Robin, her husband, and who was similar to Alan, but of course not Alan. So she kept sleeping with Alan. And then her husband went and hired Alan to find out who she was cheating on him with. Alan took the case, waited a week, then told her husband and sent him a bill.
Yeah.
Good old Alan.
Good old Alan, yeah.
And it's funny because it's this revelation that Donald comes to his senses and suggests they should call the police. I wonder why this particular moment Donald is suddenly, let's call the cops, when he was the one who initially didn't want to do that before.
Remind me, was this before or after Sandy confronted Donald about his relationship with Ellen?
I think it was before, because I think that happens when they find Donald's gun, which happens in the next scene. Or, well, not Donald's gun, but the gun on Donald's suitcase.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. I mean, Donald does change his mind. It could be just that he's come to his senses and realizes that somebody's jerking him around.
Yeah.
It could be that he is hiding something that may or may not have been revealed at some point, and he doesn't want that found out. Although presumably if the police are investigating it, they would find out.
Yeah.
But it's pretty obvious at this point that they are being jerked around.
Oh, yeah.
And
for sure.
It's surprising that they didn't all come to that conclusion.
It's surprising they don't come to a lot of conclusions, because Murphy goes to get his print kit, and I have to think, I know that it eventually turns out that Laura's is the only one that's like a full complete print, but I would have to think that there would be an assumption made that all of their prints would be on the elevator.
No, you're right. There should be everybody's prints on the elevator.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's so few prints that are clear and recordable is almost suspicious in itself.
Yeah, because Laura's is the only one. So, and we know obviously later on that it was pressed on there. So that's why it's.
Yeah, it should have been suspicious, because everybody's prints should have been on there, or presumably everybody or most everybody's. And certainly there should have been some really good prints from Alan on there.
Yeah. And then this is where Donald goes to leave. He begins packing his things. He pulls the suitcase down. That's when the gun falls and goes off.
Mm-hmm.
Murphy, which they're lucky no one got shot. Murphy picks it up. Carl, I liked this bit. Carl attacks Donald again, and then Steele says, "This is getting very boring. Have Murphy give one of them the gun and let's be done with it." Which I really liked that line. And this is where Donald goes and does his whole speech on how he admired Alan, that they were a team, even though Alan's, stole his clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the moment I kind of think there was something there beyond admiration, whether it was just like, as you said, an insecure need for Alan's friendship, or something more that they couldn't express in the 80s, but just he was really into Alan on some level.
Yeah. But part of that speech raised the question in my mind, and I think it's because the way it was written isn't real clear, and it
True.
leads you to a conclusion that isn't true. It's when Carl says, that's why when he left Havenhurst, he didn't take you with you, stole every client your agency had and left you the king of nothing. Well, the king would be the person in charge, the top man, which would suggest that he owned Havenhurst, which we know he didn't.
No.
So, yeah, that's not real clear. So I'm not sure what that refers to there.
And it also compares when Donald talks about his relationship with Alan, he describes basically doing all the legwork and Alan handling the dinners and the clients, which is essentially the arrangement that Laura and Steele are supposed to have.
Yeah,
there's a parallel there.
Yeah, except that Laura recognizes that that's the situation. And
Donald didn't.
She's okay with that because that's the situation she created. Now she may not be happy with how it's proceeding and how it's turning out, but that's the situation she created. Whereas with this, Donald was not the person who created it. Donald was kind of the victim in this, and Alan was the one running roughshod over Donald. And it was, okay, I need a monkey to do the work so that I can look like the ringmaster to everybody, and I get all the credit. But okay, you're my monkey.
Yep.
Go do the.
It's again to go back to sort of the concept of high school and the stereotypes that he's that kid that keeps following you around, desperately wanting to be your friend, but they're following the cool kids around anyway, desperately wanting to be their friend, and then the cool kids like, okay, do my homework, do this, do that, and being happy just to do it because they just want to be around them.
Yeah.
And this feels very much like Donald.
Yeah. And then he says that I counted Alan Greevy among my closest personal friends.
Yeah.
Well, obviously Alan didn't count Donald as one of his personal friends because how long had it been since they'd seen each other?
Well, yeah, because he didn't know that Alan had an elevator. So it must have been a while because you don't get a mansion like that overnight.
No.
It takes a while.
So, hello, Donald, get a clue.
Also, every single one of them, Alan has managed to screw over every single one of them with the exception of Murphy. Murphy, in this little scenario that he's concocted, he implicated Carl. He implicated Donald. He implicates Laura, which he, in fact, probably in the most egregious way, which causes you to wonder, was it that they flirted, but she didn't sleep with him? Was he angry about that? Because he basically sets her up for the most obvious,
the strongest evidence.
Yeah. And then, but there's nothing in there about Murphy. Like,
you're right.
Murphy just sort of ends up being there. And it's interesting because you wonder, does he have not, he clearly didn't really have an axe to grind with Murphy, which is interesting, I find, because Murphy is pretty much the only one that didn't really have a relationship, quote unquote, with Alan one way or another. He maybe was a little bit irritated with Alan and Laura flirting, but there wasn't really anything else there.
He didn't do anything to capture Alan's attention. That's for sure.
Which
he
didn't
could
do
be good,
to
could be
capture
bad.
Laura's attention either, but I'm bummed.
So he didn't cross Alan. He didn't double cross him on a case or make him look bad.
Or follow him around like a puppy dog.
That's true.
Yeah.
And let's face it, we know that Murphy is a diligent, nose to the grindstone, do the job, and not really make waves kind of guy. And if he had that same approach back at Havenhurst, then he would have been useful for Alan because he was doing work, he was generating information, he was taking care of cases. And if their paths didn't cross in any kind of way, I guess he would have had no reason to have a problem with him because he was useful. He did his job. He stayed out of the way.
See, Murphy, I guess there's a lesson to be learned there. If you make yourself more visible, you might get attacked by a sociopath who is planning on setting everybody up for murder, but you could also get noticed by Laura. Just FYI.
Yes. Just FYI, yes.
Just two sides of the coin there.
Can we get back to the fingerprints on the elevator?
Yeah. Yes, Murphy comes back after matching the fingerprints. Steele asks who the match was, makes a huge song and dance about how this is indisputable evidence. It's as good as a confession, which it is not.
No, it's not.
I mean, all the fingerprints show is that somebody used the elevator. That could have happened at any point in the weekend.
Yep.
So that's kind of odd that they're all putting so much stock in these prints. And, he admits to a lot of partials he couldn't match. And then eventually it's revealed that it's Laura's print. Laura denies being in the elevator, so I guess maybe she was genuinely taking the stairs. And then Steele fires Murphy.
Well, I like the lead up into that as well. I have known Laura Holt. I don't even want to think how long I've known her. Yeah, and then he fires Murphy. Can he fire Murphy?
No.
No, I didn't think so.
Which is why it's so hilarious, because, he's... And then he walks into Alan's room. He begins searching. He's obviously distressed and frustrated because Laura clearly didn't kill Alan.
Right.
Murphy, he comes in. He asks him if he even knows what he's looking for, and he doesn't. But he does point out that Alan's room is the only one they haven't searched. So this is where he starts pulling out Alan's clothing, begins criticizing them, saying that herringbone is out, which... If Cynthia was here, this would further sort of feed into her theory that he's gay. He also claims that this is an interesting statement that he makes, that we dress for what we are, and Murphy snidely comments, or what we pretend to be.
Yeah.
He's not wrong.
No, he's not.
And I think this is sort of a larger comment on the reunion itself, because they're all pretending to be something. Carl is pretending to be successful. Donald is pretending to have been valued by Alan. Sandy was pretending to be happily married. And Laura's pretending that Steele is real.
and even Alan was pretending in a way that he was, everything was going well for him, that he was this successful detective, well loved by everybody. Yeah, they're all pretending. Except Murphy. Murphy's the only one not pretending.
He's the only one without any sort of artifice to him. Murphy's always Murphy, right? But this is something that Steele understands. And then he notes what was pointed out earlier, that Alan lost a great deal of weight going from a size 44 to a 38 with no stops in between, which of course clues Laura into the answer. And Murphy's comment of, he's done it again, hasn't he? Just so baffled by the fact that he managed to find the answer. Yep, this is the next. Yeah, Laura goes to find the others. They all begin searching through Alan's things. She notes that his business was down, that he had let a lot of people go, including apparently his staff. Laura asks Murphy why people normally put an elevator in their home, and then before Murphy can answer, that's when Steele says, witness for the prosecution, and points out that Charles Lawton had a stroke and couldn't walk upstairs. So he's kind of helpful here, at least, pointing that out. And then they go back to the elevator. Now there's a chalk outline or a body outline taped on the floor. When did they have time to do that?
It's a long weekend. It's a lost weekend. They've only been
there one day. It was supposed to be from morning till nightfall.
You can do a lot when you can stop between scenes and Yeah.
She presses the button, goes down the elevator looking for clues. And this is where she figures it out, explaining what happened to Alan, that Alan's elevator murder riddle was his suicide note, essentially. That sometime during the day, he took the belt from Sandy's robe, attached it to the elevator cables, put it on top of the vent, pulled the belt through. And it's interesting because this is a rather gruesome death that they sort of gloss over very quickly, because obviously the show doesn't want to dwell on the fact that he hung himself.
Yeah.
And it's set up so that it would tear apart, pulling the belt back up through the vent to look like he was murdered. Laura points out that Alan had been in the hospital. The only thing in the kitchen was dog food. Going, where did they get the breakfast? Was Steele eating kibbles and bits?
Yeah.
And Donald asked the question, why would he do that to us? Is he really this naive?
Yeah, I think so.
He has seen the way Alan treats people, the way he uses people.
He can't get over the fact that he He definitely
Yeah.
has psychological problems. And I think this is just a manifestation of that he can't believe that Alan didn't just, okay, yeah, I can understand how he might do that to you guys, but not to me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a thought of like, I should be exempt from this because I was Alan's best friend.
Mhm.
And what's interesting as well is Laura points out the elevator servicemen were coming on Monday and they would have found the belt. First of all, how does she know they were coming? And second of all,
Apparently
would that
it was in the
exonerate?
appointment schedule.
Yeah.
I think that's what she was looking
Oh, yeah,
through. Was
because she was looking at the book.
diary,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. True. But would that exonerate any of them? Given that they not only moved the body, tampered with the scene, but also waited that long to call the police.
Well, those things, no, it wouldn't exonerate them from. It would very possibly, if they could construct or reconstruct what happened to Alan, it would exonerate any of them from the murder.
Yeah.
But yeah, tampering with witness, tampering with evidence, failing to report a murder or a crime.
Or what
all
seemed like a murder. Yeah.
Yeah. All of the things that they did that entire weekend, all of those things were basically criminal offenses.
Yep. Good job, guys. Way to go.
And then you asked why Donald would have bought into the idea that Alan just wouldn't have done that. And Carl says he was always trying to show that he was better than the rest of us. And that's certainly why Alan did what he did. And now I don't agree that Alan was better than the rest of them. He was more sleazy than the rest of them. He was more devious than the rest of them.
Yeah.
And he cheated better than the rest of them. Oh, you go do the work and I will take the credit for it. That's not being better than the rest. That's being more devious and slimy than the rest of us.
And that was a low bar given the company.
Yeah, really.
Just saying.
As evidenced by everybody here on this weekend, that was a very low bar, with the exception of Murphy and Laura.
Yeah. It's pretty low hanging fruit. So that's the non-murder solved. And I love this tag scene. I love it. They're coming into the office. Steele's describing the weekend as being exhilarating. You got to wonder where they went after, because they obviously didn't stay at the house. So, I mean, it's odd for Steele to call it a weekend when it was really like one night. But he tells Laura he thinks that she's brilliant. They head into the office only to find Murphy telling Bernice Steele's best murder story. He tells the whole story, and he knows they're there because he stands up, turns around, and asks Steele if that's how it's done. And I love this for a number of reasons, but the main reason is that it almost feels like there's a sense of camaraderie here between Murphy and Steele.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's being kind of snarky, but he also, it's almost like now it's affectionately snarky.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like a mentor seeing his protege starting to get it. Okay. You know, I've been working at you. I've been beating it into your head for months and you haven't gotten it. And now you're showing a glimmer, just the slightest glimmer of actually getting it.
And also the fact that when he's telling this story that Steele made up, Bernice is eating up every bit of it. So it must have been like a bit of a moment where Murphy could feel what it's like to be Steele, where somebody is hanging off of his every word and eating up his bull. You know, like he's watched it happen and thought, no, people can't really believe this. But then he does it, and Bernice,
and it works. It works.
So it's great. It's a great little tag to the episode. Any other thoughts or comments on the episode itself?
No, I think we pretty much hit everything. Yeah, Alan was definitely he's
the worst victim. Like,
he's probably the worst victim in the entire series. The person that you were least unhappy had died.
I don't know. I think Norman Keyes might get that award.
Yeah. But between the two of them, it would be a toss-up.
True.
And I think everybody would out there be cheering, saying, yeah, good for them. They got him. Do we really need to report this guy who did it?
Yeah. So yeah, it was. I mean, it's a good episode. Like a nice little play around with format and with what we expect versus what we get. A lot of very unlikable side characters, but it made for an entertaining little. And it was a nice reprieve from the Murphy Steele at each other's throats thing. Like obviously Murphy's not happy to see Steele there. But it's Laura is the one who shows the most irritation with him throughout the course of the 2 days, trying to pretend to solve the crime. Murphy just sort of stays out of the way, so that was kind of nice.
And I suppose that's an argument for the situation that develops in the second season where Murphy's not there anymore.
Yeah.
Because it could get tiring, but I think that it could have been handled. I think the relationship between Murphy and Steele could have evolved and still had
I would have loved to have seen
edge. It could have still had an edge to it.
Yep.
But they could have changed it. But no, you're right. If you go back to that well too often, it just gets tiring. I think that was
the problem eventually, that it got tiring, and we'll get there, but that Murphy never got any growth.
Yeah.
And they could have given him growth. They could have had, I would have loved to have seen that, where they become begrudging friends, or, it would have been, because there's some good moments between them. Like we've seen some of them already. I heard fighting. Mom and Dad are home. There's been some really good little bits back and forth. So,
but if it wasn't for Murphy leaving after the end of the first season, there would be so much fan fiction that never got written.
Fair.
Anyway. Are we going to call it done?
I think we're going to call it done. So,
okay.
I mean, we've got the reminder of the website, SteeleWatching.com, where show notes, links, witness for the prosecution.
Witness for the persecution.
Witness for the, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So, that's there. Other media resources, if you want to talk about some of those.
Yeah. We have the official Steele Watching Facebook page, which you can find by either searching on Facebook for Steele Watching, or you can get the link from our website. Our Twitter, we have an account there, which again, you can get the link from our website.
Yep.
Instagram, you can find the link for that on our website. What was that? www.SteeleWatching.com.
Yeah, maybe.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we also have a link to the Steele Watchers Facebook fan group.
Join us.
You won't regret it.
So that's good.
That sounds like
and the next episode will be Steel Trap, which will be one of yours, and episode 10 of season 1.
Yes. Looking forward to it. I already got my notes largely done, and it'll be interesting. There's some little nuggets of interesting information that come up in that one.
Yeah, that one's a good one.
So, all right.
All right.
I'm good.
Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.